If someone had told me freezing to death on a city sidewalk would be the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have called them insane. People say that when you're dying, your whole life flashes before your eyes. But when I collapsed, in that Chicago snow, there was nothing, just darkness. Cold, heavy darkness that felt ready to swallow me whole. I had no idea that within seconds, a pair of hands would drag me back from the edge of death. Hands belonging to a woman who had never allowed anyone close to her heart. They called her the Ice Queen, the billionaire doctor who turned away every woman who tried to love her, the untouchable goddess of medicine who'd built her walls so high no one could ever reach the top. But that night, she chose to save me. And in saving my life, she unknowingly cracked open the door to losing her own heart. My name is Nora, and this is the story of how I melted the ice around the heart of Dr. Sloane Everly, the woman who swore she would never fall in love. I should have died that night. Looking back now, I can see how close I came to becoming just another frozen body in the Chicago snow, another nameless girl who worked herself to exhaustion, another tragic story that would make the evening news, for maybe 30 seconds before people changed the channel. But I didn't die. And the reason I'm alive today is because of her, Dr. Sloane Everly. Even now, just thinking her name makes my heart beat faster. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. From that freezing night when everything changed. The snow fell hard that night. I remember thinking how beautiful Chicago looked under all that white. How the city lights sparkled like diamonds against the dark sky. Most people were smart enough to hurry home, wrapping themselves in thick coats and warm scarves, their breath forming little clouds in the freezing air. I wasn't one of those smart people. I had just finished my second shift of the day. First, I'd worked the morning at a coffee shop near campus, making lattes for students who probably spent more on their daily coffee than I spent on food all week. Then, I'd rush to my evening job at a small bookstore, restocking shelves until my arms ached and my feet throbbed. By the time I stepped out into the night, I was exhausted, bone-tired in a way that went deeper than just physical fatigue. It was the kind of tired that comes from working 2 jobs while trying to keep up with university classes. The kind that settles into your soul when you're alone in a big city thousands of miles from home with barely enough money to survive. I pulled my thin cream-colored coat tighter around myself. It wasn't warm enough for Chicago winters, but it was all I could afford. My student visa didn't allow me to work more hours, and every penny I earned went toward tuition, rent, and the bare minimum of food to keep myself going. Sometimes I skipped meals. Sometimes I studied by the light of street lamps to save on electricity. Sometimes I cried myself to sleep in my tiny rented room, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake coming to America to chase my dreams. But I never gave up. Giving up wasn't in my nature. That night, though, my body had other plans. I was walking down a quiet street, my shoes crunching through the fresh snow, when the world started spinning. At first, I thought I was just dizzy. From hunger, I hadn't eaten since breakfast. A single piece of toast I'd forced down before my morning shift. Then my legs turned to water beneath me. I remember reaching out, trying to grab onto something, anything. But there was nothing there. Just air and snow and the distant glow of streetlights that suddenly seemed very far away. The last thing I felt was the cold pavement rising up to meet me. The last thing I thought was, "I'm sorry, Mom, I tried." Then everything went black. I don't know how long I lay there in the snow. Minutes, hours. Time had no meaning in that darkness. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that at that exact moment, someone was watching. She had just finished a 16-hour shift at our private clinic. Dr. Sloane Everly, the legendary billionaire doctor who owned the most prestigious medical facility in Chicago. The woman who had saved thousands of lives with her surgical skills and her money. The woman who, according to every whisper and rumor in the city, had never let anyone close to her heart. She was walking to her car, her black heels clicking against the pavement, her designer coat perfect against the snow. She had been about to drive away to return to her penthouse and her solitary life, but then she saw me. I learned all this later, of course. At the time, I knew nothing. I was unconscious, my body slowly freezing, my pulse growing weaker with each passing second. She told me later that she almost walked away. She thought I was just another drunk person who'd passed out after a night of partying. Chicago was full of them, especially near the bars and clubs. But something made her stop. Maybe it was the way the streetlight fell across my face. Maybe it was something in her gut. That doctor's instinct that had saved so many lives. Whatever it was, she came closer. And when she knelt beside me and pressed her fingers against my wrist, checking for a pulse, she felt how weak it was. How close to stopping, she muttered. Under her breath, I learned later that this was typical of her, that quiet disapproval of anything that disrupted her perfectly ordered world. But then she did something that surprised even herself. She lifted me into her arms. I was told I felt light as snow itself, my body dangerously thin from months of skipping meals. She carried me back into the hospital she just left, shouting orders at nurses who stared in shock at seeing their cold, distant boss suddenly appearing with an unconscious stranger in her arms. I woke up slowly, consciousness returning in fragments. White ceiling, soft beeping, the smell of antiseptic and clean sheets. I blinked, confused. This wasn't my tiny room. This wasn't anywhere I recognized. Then I remembered the snow, the cold, the feeling of falling. I sat up too quickly and immediately regretted it as the room spun around me. My head throbbed and my body felt weak, like I'd been wrung out and left to dry. That's when I saw her for the first time. She was standing near the window, tall and imposing in a white doctor's coat. Her dark hair was styled perfectly, not a strand out of place despite the late hour. Her face looked like it had been carved from stone, all sharp, angles and aristocratic features. But it was her eyes that caught me, dark, intense, and cold as the winter night outside. "You fainted?" she said without looking at me. Her voice was low, steady, completely controlled. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Where am I? My hospital." She finally turned those piercing eyes on me. "You're lucky I found you." Lucky? I shivered. And not from cold. I was alive because of her. A complete stranger had saved my life. "Thank you, ma'am," I whispered. "I'm so sorry for the trouble. You should be." Her words were harsh, but something flickered in her expression too quickly for me to identify. "Do you know you could have died out there?" I lowered my head, shame burning through me. I didn't want to cry. Not in front of this intimidating woman, but my chest hurt with more than just physical pain. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I managed to say. For a long moment, she just stared at me. I felt her gaze like a weight, studying me, analyzing me the way a doctor might study a particularly interesting case. Then she spoke again, her voice slightly softer. "You need to rest. I'll send someone with your bill in the morning." My heart dropped straight into my stomach. Bill? Of course there would be a bill. This wasn't some charity clinic. This was a private hospital, probably the most expensive in Chicago, and I had no money. Not even enough to buy myself a decent meal, let alone pay for emergency medical treatment. I bit my lip hard, fighting back tears. I couldn't cry. I couldn't beg. That would only make her look down on me even more. When she left the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. I was alive, but I had just traded one death for another kind of ending. How could I ever pay this debt? What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have guessed, was that this was just the beginning. The beginning of something that would change both our lives forever. Morning came too quickly. I woke to the sound of footsteps and soft voices outside. My body still felt weak, but at least the dizziness had passed. I sat up carefully, running my hands through my messy blonde hair, trying to look somewhat presentable. A nurse walked in holding a clipboard. She was young, maybe a few years older than me, with kind eyes and a professional smile. "Good morning, miss," she said politely. "I hope you're feeling better. Here's your bill." She handed me the clipboard, and I looked down at the number written there. My vision blurred, my hands started shaking. It was more than my entire year's tuition. More than 6 months of rent, more money than I'd ever seen in one place in my entire life. My voice came out as barely a whisper. I can't. The nurse's smile turned sad, sympathetic. She'd probably seen this before. People like me who couldn't afford the care they've received. You should speak to Dr. Everly, she said gently. She's the one who brought you in. I nodded numbly, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The nurse led me through shining hallways that screamed wealth and prestige. Everything was spotless, modern, expensive. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings, original artwork, decorated walls. This wasn't just a hospital. It was a palace of medicine, and I was just a poor student who couldn't even afford to buy herself lunch. We stopped in front of a large wooden door. The nurse knocked once, then pushed it open. The office inside was huge with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. A massive desk dominated the center, made of dark wood that probably cost more than everything I owned. And behind that desk sat Dr. Sloan Everly. She was writing something, her pen moving across paper with precise strokes. She didn't look up when I entered. "You're awake," she said without raising her eyes. "Yes, ma'am." My voice was small, trembling. "Thank you for saving me. You should take better care of yourself." She set down her pen and finally looked at me. Those dark eyes rooted me to the spot. "You nearly froze to death?" I clutched the bill in my trembling hands. "Ma'am, about the bill?" "Yes." I drew in a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. "I can't pay it." The office went utterly silent. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze locked on my face. I felt like I was being taken apart piece by piece, studied under a microscope. "This is not a charity," she said, her tone like ice. My throat tightened. I could beg. I could cry. I could throw myself at her mercy and hope she'd spare me. But something inside me refused. I'd left my home country with my head held. I'd worked 2 jobs with pride. I wasn't going to lose myself now. "I'm not asking for pity," I said, forcing my voice not to shake. "If you let me, I'll work to pay it off. Any job cleaning, filing, helping in the clinic, whatever you need. I don't like debts. You saved me, so I'll repay you. With my own hands." For a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe? Most people probably sobbed, pleaded, or made excuses. But I stood there, chin lifted, offering the only things I had, my work and my dignity. She stayed, quiet for what felt like forever. Her fingers tapped once against the desk, a sharp, deliberate sound. Then, to both of our surprise, she said, "Fine, you can start today." My eyes widened. "Really? Don't make me regret it." Her voice remained firm, but there was the faintest softening in her expression. "Be ready to work." "Thank you, ma'am." "Thank you so much." I ducked my head slightly, flooded with relief and gratitude. As I turned to go, I could feel her gaze on my back. When I glanced over my shoulder, she was watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. I didn't know it then, but in that moment, something had shifted inside Dr. Sloan. Everly's carefully controlled world, something she didn't understand and couldn't explain. And for me, I had just made a deal that would lead me into a love story I never could have imagined. My real battle was only beginning. My first day at the Everly Clinic was baptism by fire. I arrived early that morning, my hands still trembling, slightly as I pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby alone took my breath away. Marble floors so polished I could see my reflection. Modern art pieces that probably cost more than my entire education, and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel rather than a medical facility. This was Dr. Sloan Everly's empire, and I was about to become the lowest person in it. The whispers started almost immediately. I felt eyes on me as I walked through the hallways, following the directions the receptionist had given me. Nurses, huddled in small groups, their voices dropping to murmurs as I passed. I caught fragments of their conversations. Words that stung like little cuts. Who is she? Why is Dr. Everly letting her work here? She doesn't look like she belongs. Probably some charity case. I kept my head down and kept walking. I faced judgment before. Being a foreign student in America, being poor in a city of wealth, being alone in a world that didn't always want me, I'd learned to develop thick skin. But it still hurt. I was assigned to work under the head nurse, a woman named Marissa, who looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. She was in her early 30s, perfectly put together with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. "So you're the one," she said, looking me up and down with obvious disdain. "The girl Dr. Everly found in the snow." "Yes, ma'am." I tried to smile. Nora, I'm here to help however I can." "Nora," she said my name like it tasted bad. "Well, Nora, let me make something very clear. This is a prestigious clinic. We maintain certain standards here. I don't know what arrangement you have with Dr. Everly, but don't expect special treatment." "I don't expect anything," I said quietly. "Just tell me what needs to be done." She gave me a list of tasks that would have made a full-time employee exhausted: cleaning equipment, organizing files, restocking supplies, helping patients with paperwork, all while attending my university classes in the morning and studying whenever I could find a spare moment. It was brutal, but I'd faced brutal before. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. What I didn't know was that throughout that entire first day, she was watching me. Dr. Sloan Everly moved through her clinic like queen through her kingdom, confident, untouchable, commanding respect with every step. I saw her from a distance. Several times, always surrounded by staff or patients, always completely in control. But what I didn't see were the moments when her eyes found me across a crowded hallway. The way her gaze would linger as I carefully cleaned medical instruments, or patiently helped an elderly patient fill out forms. She told me later that she couldn't explain it, even to herself. She'd hired countless employees over the years and never given them a second thought. But something about watching me work with quiet dignity, even in the face of whispers and judgment, made her chest tighten in a way she didn't understand. I was different, and Dr. Sloan Everly didn't know what to do with different. By lunchtime, I was exhausted. I'd been moving nonstop since 7 in the morning, and my stomach was growling. But I'd learned to ignore hunger. It was just another discomfort in a life full of them. I found a quiet corner in a back hallway and pulled out my notebook. I had an exam coming up, and if I could just squeeze in 30 minutes of studying during my break. Taking a break already? I looked up to find Marissa standing over me, her arms crossed and her expression cold. "I'm studying," I said, showing her my textbook. "I have classes in the evening. How convenient." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Must be nice to treat this place like it's just a side job." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm working hard, ma'am. I'm doing everything you asked." "Barely." She turned to walk away, then paused and looked back. "You know, people like you don't usually last here. This isn't the kind of place for someone who can't even afford proper work shoes." I looked down at my worn sneakers, the only shoes I owned that were comfortable enough for hours of standing. Shame burned through me, hot and painful, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. The days blurred together into exhausting routine. Classes in the morning, work at the clinic in the afternoon and evening, studying late into the night. I barely slept. I definitely wasn't eating enough, but I was surviving, and that was all that mattered. The other staff members mostly ignored me except for the occasional whispered comment or cold look. I was the outsider, the charity case, the girl who didn't belong, but I did my work well. I was always on time, always careful, always respectful. Slowly, some of the patients started to recognize me and smile. A few even requested my help specifically when filling out their paperwork, saying I was patient and kind. Those small moments of kindness kept me going. And then there was her. Dr. Sloan Everly remained a distant figure in my life. Someone I saw but never really interacted with. She was always busy with surgeries, consultations, meetings with important people. Sometimes I'd see her walking past with a group of investors or medical professionals, her voice calm and authoritative as she discussed complex procedures or financial matters. She looked like a woman who existed in a completely different universe from mine. Powerful, wealthy, untouchable. But sometimes when I thought no one was looking, I'd watch her. The way she moved with such confidence. The way her hands were gentle when examining a patient, even though her voice was cold. The way her eyes, those dark, intense eyes, seemed to see everything. I told myself I was just curious, that she was simply an interesting person to observe. I was lying to myself, but I didn't know it yet. Everything changed 3 weeks into my time at the clinic. I was carrying a heavy box of medical supplies down a hallway, struggling slightly with the weight. I'd skipped breakfast that morning to save money, and my arms were shaking more than usual. The box slipped. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. I watched in horror as bottles crashed to the floor, the sound echoing through the hallway like thunder. Glass shattered. Liquid spilled across the pristine marble floor. Everyone stopped and turned to stare. My face burned with humiliation, as I immediately dropped to my knees, trying to clean up the mess. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick up the broken pieces. Be careful. Marissa's voice cut through the silence like a whip. She appeared from somewhere, her face twisted with anger. You don't belong here. You'll only make mistakes. This is exactly why people like you. Enough. One word, just one word. But it cut through the air with the force of a command. Dr. Sloan. Everly stood at the end of the hallway, her expression cold as ice. Everyone froze. The clinic fell absolutely silent. She walked forward, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. When she reached us, her gaze swept across the gathered staff, and I saw several people actually take a step back. She's working harder than any of you, Dr. Everly said, her voice low and dangerous. I've watched her. She arrives early. She stays late. She never complains. She treats every task, no matter how small, with care and dignity. Her eyes found Marissa, and the head nurse actually pulled. If anyone has a problem with her, Dr. Everly continued, her voice dropping even lower. They can leave now. I won't tolerate this kind of treatment in my clinic. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Then Dr. Everly's gaze dropped to me, still kneeling on the floor among the broken bottles. For just a moment, something flickered in those cold eyes. Something that looked almost like concern. Clean this up, she said, her voice softer now. And be more careful next time. Then she turned and walked away, leaving stunned silence in her wake. My hands were still trembling as I finished cleaning, but now it wasn't from shame. It was from something else entirely. She had defended me. Dr. Sloan Everly, the woman who supposedly cared for nothing and no one, had stood up for me in front of her entire staff. Why? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I lay in my small bed in my tiny rented room, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. The way she had appeared like an avenging angel, the way her voice had gone. Soft when she spoke directly to me. The way my heart had jumped when her eyes met mine. I told myself it didn't mean anything. She was just being a fair employer. She would have done the same for anyone. But deep in my heart, in a place I wasn't ready to acknowledge yet, I knew I was lying to myself. After that day, something shifted in the clinic. The whispers didn't stop completely, but they became quieter and more careful. Marissa still didn't like me, but she stopped making open comments. The other staff members began to treat me with a cautious neutrality, if not actual friendliness. And Dr. Everly, I started noticing small things. A cup of coffee would appear on my workstation with no note, no explanation. It was always exactly how I liked it, simple with just a touch of cream. When I worked late organizing files in the records room, I'd sometimes hear her voice in the hallway outside telling the security guard to make sure the student got home safely. There was one time when I was clearly running on fumes that she appeared in the supply room where I was restocking shelves and said flatly, "Go home. You're useless to anyone if you collapse again." It wasn't kind, it wasn't gentle. But beneath the sharpness of her words, I heard something else. She was worried about me. The realization made my heart thud faster in my chest in a way I really didn't want to analyze. 4 weeks into my work at the clinic, Chicago was hit with another brutal snowstorm. I finished my shift late. Around 9 p.m., the clinic was nearly deserted, just security and a few night staff lingering in the halls. I grabbed my battered backpack and my thin coat, bracing myself for the long freezing walk back to my apartment. The second I stepped outside, the wind slammed into me like a wall. Snow whipped through the air, and the temperature had plunged to a dangerous low. I pulled my coat tighter around me and started walking, head bowed against the storm. I didn't see the car. It came tearing around the corner, headlights slicing through the whiteout. I was halfway across the street, my vision blurred by the blizzard, when suddenly there was a flash of light, a roar of sound, and my hand clamped around my arm, yanking me backward. I crashed into something solid and warm. Strong arms wrapped around me as the car shot past, close enough that I felt the rush of air scrape across my face. My heart was hammering so violently, I thought it might explode. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stand there trembling. Then I realized whose arms were around me. "Are you trying to die again?" Dr. Everly's voice snapped through the storm, harsh and furious, but she still hadn't released me. If anything, her grip tightened. I tilted my head up and the first time I saw her face completely unmasked. Her dark eyes were wide, her skin pale. She looked scared for me. My voice was barely a breath. "I didn't see the car." "You never see anything." Her tone was rough, but her hands were careful as she studied me. "You work yourself into the ground. You walk through blizzards in a coat that wouldn't keep a child warm. You skip meals." She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she'd said too much. I stared at her, my heart racing for an entirely different reason now. "How do you know? I skip meals?" She looked away, her jaw tightening. "I notice things. You notice me?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. The snow fell around us, and the street was empty except for the two of us standing there in the cold. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, she said. Yes, that single word changed everything. I don't know how long we stood there. It could have been seconds or minutes or hours. All I knew was that I was looking at Dr. Sloane Everly, really looking at her and seeing something I never expected. Vulnerability. She let go of me abruptly, taking a step back. But her eyes lingered on my face, and I saw something in them that made my breath catch. "Go home," she said, her voice returning to its usual cold control. "And for God's sake, be careful." She turned and walked to her car, a sleek black vehicle. That probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. But before she got in, she looked back at me one more time. Our eyes met across the snowy street, and something passed between us. Something unspoken but powerful. Then she drove away, leaving. Me standing there with my heart pounding and my mind spinning. What was happening to me? And more importantly, what was happening to her? The next morning, I arrived at the clinic to find a package waiting for me at the front desk. "This came for you," the receptionist said, handing me a large shopping bag. Inside was a coat. Not just any coat, but a beautiful high-quality winter coat that looked like it had come from an expensive store. It was warm, well-made, and in a soft gray color that would go with everything. There was no note, no card, no explanation, but I knew who it was from. My hands trembled as I held the coat. This was too much, too expensive, too personal. I should return it. I should march into her office right now and give it back. Explain that I couldn't accept such an expensive gift. But even as I thought it, I was pulling the coat on. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for me. And it was so warm, warmer than anything I'd felt in months. I wore it that day and the next and every day after. And every time I did, I felt like I was wrapped in her care. Her concern, her attention, The whispers in the clinic changed after that. Did you see her coat? Dr. Everly gave it to her. I'm sure of it. Why would she do that? Maybe she's trying to. The speculation was endless. Some were curious. Some were cruel. But everyone had an opinion about why the cold, untouchable Dr. Sloane Everly would give an expensive gift to a poor student working off a medical bill. I tried to ignore it all, but it was hard when I saw the way people looked at me now with curiosity, with judgment, with something that looked almost like jealousy. And it was even harder when I caught myself looking for her in every hallway, my heart jumping every time I heard her voice or saw her tall figure in the distance. I was in trouble. Deep, serious trouble. Because somewhere between the snow and the coffee and the coat, between the defense in the hallway and the fear in her eyes, when that car almost hit me, I had started to fall for Dr. Sloane Everly. The woman who rejected everyone, the woman who built walls so high no one could climb them, the woman who lived in a different world from mine. I was falling for her and I didn't know how to stop. 6 weeks into my time at the clinic, everything came to a head. I was in the break room late one evening studying for an important exam. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving the clinic quiet except for the hum of machines and the occasional footstep in distant hallways. I was so focused on my textbook that I didn't hear her approach. You're still here. I jumped, nearly dropping my book. Dr. Everly stood in the doorway, still in her white coat, looking as composed and perfect as always. Oh, Dr. Everly. Yes, I have an exam tomorrow. I need to study. She walked into the room, her eyes moving over the scattered papers and books on the table. You work all day and then you study all night. When do you rest? When I succeed, I said with a small smile, echoing the words I'd once told her. Something flickered across her face. She pulled out a chair and, to my absolute shock, sat down across from me. We'd never sat together like this. Never had a real conversation beyond brief exchanges about work. This was different. Why are you working so hard? She asked quietly. I looked down at my books. Because I have to. Because I came to this country with dreams, and I won't let anything stop me from achieving them. Not poverty, not exhaustion, not anything. Even if it kills you. Her words were harsh, but her voice was gentle. I looked up and found her watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I'd rather die trying than live with regret, I said honestly. For a long moment. She just stared at me. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, she said. You're different. Different how? She looked away and I saw her jaw tighten as if she was fighting some internal battle. Different from everyone else. Different from anyone I've ever met. My heart started pounding. There was something in her voice, something I'd never heard before. Something that sounded almost like, no, I couldn't let myself think that. It was impossible, Dr. Everly. You should go home, she said abruptly, standing up. It's late. You need rest before your exam. But as she turned to leave, I saw something in her eyes that made my world tilt on its axis. She looked at me the way I'd been trying so hard not to look at her, like I mattered. Like I was more than just an employee or a charity case or a girl working off a debt. Like I was someone she couldn't stop thinking about. After that night, I couldn't deny it anymore. The coffee that appeared on my desk every morning. The way her eyes followed me when she thought I wasn't looking. The protective anger when Marissa had mocked me. The fear on her face when that car almost hit me. The coat that kept me warm through every cold day. Dr. Sloane Everly, the woman who rejected everyone, was paying attention to me. And I was completely hopelessly falling for her. It terrified me. How could I let myself feel this way about someone so far above me? Someone who lived in penthouses while I lived in a room barely bigger than a closet. Someone who owned hospitals while I could barely afford my next meal. It was impossible. It was foolish. But my heart didn't care about logic or reason or the vast distance between our worlds. My heart had made its choice. The breaking point came on a cold night almost 2 months after I'd started working at the clinic. I was finishing up in the records room, organizing files that had been misplaced. It was nearly 10 at night, and the building was mostly empty. I should have gone home hours ago, but I'd stayed late to make up for time I'd missed earlier in the week due to exams. I didn't hear her approach. One moment I was alone, and the next she was standing in the doorway. "You're still here?" It wasn't a question. I turned, my heart immediately jumping. Dr. Everly. I was just finishing up. She walked into the room, and I noticed something different about her tonight. She looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally, like she'd been fighting a battle within herself and had finally grown weary of the war. "Nora," she said my name for what felt like the first time, and the sound of it on her lips made my breath catch. "We need to talk." My heart started pounding. Did I do something wrong? No, she stepped closer. "That's the problem. You've done everything right." I didn't understand. Do you know what it's like?" She interrupted, her voice low and intense. "To spend your entire life building walls. To reject every person who tried to get close because you believed love was weakness. To be so sure of yourself and your choices that nothing could shake you." I could only stare at her frozen in place. I thought I had it all figured out. She continued, taking another step closer. "I had my work, my hospital, my success. I didn't need anything else. I didn't want anything else." Another step. We were so close now. I could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "Then I found you dying in the snow," she whispered. And everything I thought I knew about myself started to crumble. "Dr. Everly, Sloan." Her voice was almost pleading. "My name is Sloan." The use of her first name felt intimate, sacred, like she was giving me something precious. "Sloan?" I breathed, testing the name on my tongue. She closed her eyes briefly, as if hearing me say it caused her physical pain. When she opened them again, I saw something raw and vulnerable staring back at me. "For 2 months, I've watched you," she said. "I've seen you work harder than anyone in this building. I've seen you face judgment and cruelty with grace and dignity. I've seen you smile even when you're exhausted, help even when you're hurting, persevere even when everything's against you." My eyes were burning with unshed tears. "I've tried to ignore it," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I've tried to tell myself it's just curiosity or respect or anything other than what it really is. But I can't lie to myself anymore." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and gently touched my face. The contact sent electricity through my entire body. "Nora," she whispered, her thumb brushing across my cheek. "You've broken down every wall I spent years building. You've made me feel things I swore I would never feel. You've shown me that love isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength I've ever known." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Sloan, I'm falling for you," she said, the words coming out like a confession torn from her soul. "God help me. I'm falling for you, and I don't know how to stop. I don't want to stop." The world seemed to stop spinning. Everything faded away except for her. Her face, her eyes, her hand gentle against my skin. "You can't mean that," I whispered, even though every cell in my body was screaming that she did. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Her other hand came up to cut my face, cradling it between her palms like I was something precious. "You walked into my life when I thought I had everything, and you showed me I had nothing. Not really. Not the things that actually matter." "I'm nobody," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm poor. I'm struggling. I'm so far below your world that you're everything." She said it with such fierce conviction that I had no choice but to believe her. "You're brave and kind and strong. You're real in a world full of fakery. You're warm in a life that's been cold for so long I'd forgotten what warmth felt like." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against mine. I could feel her breath on my lips, could smell her subtle perfume, could feel the trembling in her hands. "Tell me you feel it too," she whispered. "Tell me I'm not alone in this." I closed my eyes, tears streaming freely now. I'd been so scared to admit it, even to myself. But standing here with her, feeling her hands on my face and hearing the vulnerability in her voice, I couldn't hide anymore. I feel it, I whispered back. I felt it for weeks, maybe since the beginning. I tried to fight it, tried to tell myself it was impossible, but I opened my eyes and looked directly into hers. I'm falling for you too, Sloane. I'm terrified, and it doesn't make sense, and I have no idea how this could ever work, but I'm falling, and I can't stop. The smile that spread across her face was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It transformed her, softening all those sharp edges, lighting up those dark eyes. Then don't stop, she said. Don't fight it. Let yourself fall because I promise you I'll catch you. And then with infinite gentleness, she pulled me into her arms. I melted against her, burying my face in her shoulder as she held me tight. She was warm and solid and real, and for the first time since I'd arrived in this cold city, I felt truly safe. We stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet records room while the rest of the world fell away. Her hands stroked my hair, and I felt her press a soft kiss to the top of my head. I was so lonely, she whispered against my hair. I didn't even realize how lonely I was until you. I pulled back just enough to look up at her. What happens now? Her thumb brushed away my tears. Now we figure it out together. I won't lie to you, Nora. It won't be easy. People will talk. My family will have opinions. There will be challenges. I know, but I don't care. Her voice was firm, decided. Let them talk. Let them judge. I've spent my whole life living for other people's approval. For the first time, I'm going to live for myself, for us. US, I repeated, the word tasting like hope and possibility. If you'll have me, she said softly. I know I'm not easy. I'm cold and demanding and set in my ways. I don't know how to do this, how to be in love, but I want to try with you. I stood on my tiptoes and wrapped my arms around her neck. Yes, I whispered. Yes to all of it. Yes to us. She smiled again. That beautiful, rare smile that I was already addicted to. Then she lowered her head and pressed her lips to my forehead in a kiss so tender it made my heart ache. Come on, she said, pulling back and taking my hand. Let me drive you home. It's late and you need rest. Okay. As we walked out of the clinic together, her hand warm in mine, I thought about how much my life had changed in just 2 months. I'd come so close to dying in the snow. And instead, I'd found something I never knew I was looking for. Love. Real, terrifying, beautiful love with a woman who had spent her whole life running from it. We stepped out into the cold Chicago night. And this time, I wasn't alone in the snow. This time, I had her hand in mine and her coat around my shoulders. This time, I was home. So that's how it began. The night I almost died became the night I truly started living. You know, when I look back at that girl lying in the snow, broken, exhausted, ready to give up, I barely recognize her. Love changed me. Sloane changed me. Not because she fixed me, but because she saw me. Really saw me. And in her eyes, I found the strength to see myself. Our story didn't end that night in the records room. If anything, it was just beginning. We weathered storms together, her family's rejection, society's judgment, the constant whispers that trailed behind us wherever we went. None of it was easy, but we didn't face it alone, and that changed everything. If you're watching this right now and fighting your own battles, if you feel invisible, unworthy, or like love is something that happens to other people but was never meant for you, I want you to hear me clearly. You're worthy. You're seen. And your love story is out there waiting for you in the most unexpected corners of your life with the most unexpected person. Mine was buried in the snow on a Chicago street. Where will yours be? Thank you for letting me open my heart to you today. This is Nora, and this is our story, the story of how the woman who rejected all women finally opened her heart. If this story touched you, please like this video, subscribe to Fantasy Hub, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that love can reach us even in our darkest moments. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you believe in unexpected love? Until next time, remember love always finds a way.